A fresh conversation about disability. And we're so excited to welcome Matthew Shapiro of Six Wheels Consulting. But before we do that, we're going to stop sharing our screen. It's great to see you all on screen. A year ago, we were just beginning a new way of life. In the throes of the global pandemic, we've experienced changes to our daily lives, to our work, our families, our friends. We've also experienced opportunities and possibilities that our new way of life has given us. And that's how we think about everyone's welcome. Both Gabby and I have been active in faith community, disability, and inclusion for many years. When we realized that there would be little chance of people meeting up at conferences, we decided let's create a web series and call it Everyone's Welcome. Our hope is that Everyone's Welcome brings people together, people living with disabilities and mental health conditions, and those who love them, researchers, advocates, and professionals who can bring their stories to a new audience. Our guests have many diverse experiences and perspectives on so many topics about disability and mental health, and we created a vehicle for them to share their stories with all of you. Everyone's Welcome is a collaborative production of Whole Community Inclusion at Jewish Learning Venture and Inclusion Innovations. We invite your questions and comments. Please type your questions in chat. And we'll be extending the webinar for up to 10 minutes to accommodate questions. So if you'd like to stay on with us after our conversation with Matthew, please feel free to do that. We are captioning this presentation as always. And if you click on the bottom of your screen on the CC, you can set that up and it'll appear immediately. We're also recording Everyone's Welcome. So we'll be sending that out to you soon. And of course, everyone is muted. Well, Gabby, we haven't done this in a long time. We haven't had our little, Gabby Shelley Fest. But what new and exciting things are you involved with?
Oh, thanks, Shelley. Well, it's always busy here with our whole community inclusion initiative. We're very fortunate this year to get some funding from the Covenant Foundation, and we're starting a new initiative called JKid Access Families, where our friend and colleague, Rabbi Michelle Greenfield, is directing that for us. And she's training 6 different professionals at 6 different synagogue communities and on how to do family engagement programs that are accessible and inclusive. And those families not only will get to work with a guide who Rabbi Michelle trains, but they'll get some materials to celebrate Jewish life at home with their families. So they're going to get a Passover kit to make the Seder, some cool tactile activities to do to make it really interesting for all kids at the Seder. So we're super excited and busy getting that started. How about you, Shelley? What is new and exciting in your always busy world?
It is always busy. Well, as you know, Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month is over. It was over in February, and there was so many things going on this year, but I just have to share some of my thought process, and that is this year more than ever, I just, kept rattling around in my brain. This is, there's such a perception that this is JDAM is something you check off, you're
Mhm.
done. And that's always been a challenge. But I decided this year is really something that we all need to focus on taking this further. So I'm really excited to be thinking about that. I've had a couple of conversations with people in different Jewish organizations trying to figure out where the gaps are. Why is this so hard for people to wrap their heads around belonging and inclusion? And I'm really excited to push that envelope even
Mm.
further. Um, and I've been writing my memoir. It's just starting, but it's a completely different style of writing for me, and I'm really excited to. I don't know if I'll ever publish it, but it's kind of neat
Shelley,
to look back and go, "Wow, amazing!"
absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
I, you know, believe we all have a story, and you're an amazing writer. So that's very exciting. All right, I'm going to jump in and welcome our amazing guest, Matthew Shapiro, who is a 2013 graduate of VCU, where he completed a Bachelors of Interdisciplinary Studies degree. Throughout college, he participated in several internships, including opportunities with the White House, the U.S. Department of Transportation, as well as with several Virginia area disability organizations. In 2014, he developed a disability consulting company called Six Wheels Consulting. It's the goal of Six Wheels Consulting to work with businesses of all types to help advance their understanding of disability culture. In his free time, he enjoys learning about politics, watching sports, and hanging out with his dog, VP. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to
Hi.
an amazing conversation.
Well, Matthew, it's just great to see you again. I think we saw each other in person 2 years, was it 2 years ago? Maybe 3 years ago.
Might have been a little bit longer, but it's good to see you again.
It's great to see you too. And Matthew is stopping by from Richmond, Virginia today. So we're just so glad you're here.
Glad to be.
Matthew, will you tell us about your experience and how that led to you starting Six Wheels Consulting?
Sure. So as my intro said, I'm a person with a disability. I was born with cerebral palsy. Turned 30 this year, so I hit a new milestone, which is very hard to think about, but still wrapping my head around that. But was 12 weeks premature when I was born. Spent 7 weeks in the intensive care unit, and because of that, was by the age of 3, I believe I was diagnosed with CP. So I've always sort of had disability on the brain and had to figure out how to navigate this world as a person with a disability. And I started getting involved in advocacy work when I was a junior in high school, and I participated in the Virginia Youth Leadership Forum and then with the Virginia Department of Education's I'm Determined project. And so that's where I got my bug to really want to do disability advocacy work and help other people who don't have a voice. And, I feel very fortunate in the sense that I am able to speak clearly, have good speech, and I have always tried to use my voice as a tool for change and a tool to make an impact. And so when I graduated from VCU in 2013, I had spent a lot of time doing interviews and looking for jobs and doing all the stuff that a typical recent graduate would do. But I was not getting anywhere in terms of employment and getting job offers. And so one night in December of 2014, I was kind of laying in bed and sort of had this epiphany moment where I was like, let me start my own disability consulting business and try to challenge the way people think about, talk about, and approach disability and disability inclusion in all facets of life, right? Our religious circles, businesses, schools, nonprofits, everywhere. So from that day until today, I've been actively trying to grow my business and really challenge the way people think about disability and disability inclusion. And every day is a fun adventure. That's one of the things I think I really love about my work is that if you're an accountant, you do accounting every day, right? You go into the office and you do accounting. With my work, I never know what each day is going to bring. I get to do amazing projects. I get to meet amazing people like you all and engage in these kinds of conversations. So it just is refreshing every day to know that each day is different, and it gets me up every day and gets me excited to do my work.
Matthew, that's a great sort of framework about your consultancy. So I want to ask you if you can share with everyone, what are some of those projects? What does it look like, the kind of work that you're doing through Six Wheels?
Great question. So I have 3 buckets of work that I do. I do a lot of consulting projects. I do a ton of public speaking. As I said, my greatest strength is my ability to talk. So anytime I get a chance to share a message or expose people to disability and disability inclusion, that's what I'm all about. And then the third bucket is I'm a lobbyist in the Virginia General Assembly. So I'm the biggest political nerd that you will know. And so anytime I can sort of engage in the political process in that way, I try to do that. So as far as what projects I'm currently working on, I just finished my Virginia General Assembly session in March, in the beginning of March. And we were able to get a bill passed this year through a virtual session, which I was very, very surprised about. I did not expect us to be able to do much this year because I had no idea what to expect with session being completely virtual. But we passed a alternative application process for people with disabilities to get their foot in the door with state government jobs. Virginia, for the last 5 years, has been under a mandate to try and increase the employment of people with disabilities within our state agencies by 5%. So from 2017 until next year, we've been under that mandate. And we got data from our human resource management office that we were under 1% of that goal as of this summer. So we were having to figure out, all right, what's another alternative way that we can get more people their foot in the door with state agency jobs. And so we developed or are developing that alternative application that is similar to what's known as Schedule A in the federal government, which is another way to get your foot in the door with federal government jobs. So we're sort of mirroring the same thing in the state of Virginia. So we were able to get that done. Very, very big deal in terms of employment for people with disabilities. I'm working on a webinar series with another disability consultant that's all about how do you hire and maintain people with disabilities in the workplace that we're working on and hoping to then turn around and kind of market and sell to businesses. I have 5 speeches lined up already for the rest of the year. So lots going on. And I'm also, too, working on a book that's going to take me quite a long time, but we're doing lots of stuff, and I'm very busy, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Matthew, that painted a great picture, and congratulations on your success with the lobbying. It's huge. And so that brings me to our next question, which is, what are the most pervasive obstacles that you're working to educate about and change in your work that you're doing with government entities and also with corporate sector?
Yeah, so I think the big overarching thing is that like disability and disability inclusion really shouldn't be as hard as society makes it to a certain extent, right? I have this whole idea that I use within my work. It's this idea of inclusion above compliance, right? Because we all know that something can be inclusive but not fully compliant, something can be compliant but not fully inclusive. And oftentimes, people kind of use that as, well, I'm compliant by the standards of the ADA. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody can fully engage in the workplace, in the religious space, anything that, that we're trying to do. We want people to fully engage, and we want people to understand that disability is part of our everyday life, right? And we all need to sort of work together to make our world as inclusive and welcoming as possible. So often for me, on a consistent basis, I still get people coming up to me and going, "I'm glad you're out today," right? And I'm glad to see you here. And people are so shocked when they realize I'm as intelligent and as articulate as I am, and they will oftentimes come up to me and talk to me like I'm 5 rather than 30. And so we've got all these and I sometimes, many of the times, right, those intentions aren't done out of like malice or rudeness, I guess, but it does get to the heart of, right, we have to help people understand that like disability and disability inclusion, it takes all of us to be welcoming and inclusive. And, I can't wait for the day where there's not barriers for me to get into spaces, and there's not, people don't come up to me and go, "I'm glad you're out today," right? But we have so much work that we still have to do in terms of seeing the value in people with disabilities in the disability community, seeing the upside in hiring them, seeing the upside in making our spaces accessible and inclusive so that people with disabilities can spend money and can be active participants in our society. People with disabilities have about $220 billion of discretionary income, and that doesn't include their family members, right? So there's a huge population of people that have so much resources and so many things that they can bring to the table, but the rest of society doesn't really meet us halfway, right? And I think all we're kind of really saying is like, all right, society, like, work with us and sort of meet us halfway so that we can show you the talents, the gifts, and the amazing things that we can bring to the workplace, or we can bring to your community, or we can bring to your religious sector, right? It is so refreshing to see the ideas and the different way in which people with disabilities like approach the world, that it could benefit so many other people. But because society is somewhat restricting, people don't get to hear those messages or get those ideas, or view the world through the lens of somebody in a seated position, or through the lens of somebody who may be blind or visually impaired, whatever the case may be. But I really think we need to do more of that, and have some of those more difficult conversations so that people feel more comfortable in those spaces.
I'm just nodding my head, Matthew. Yes. And I just wanted to highlight something you said about income and spending. And one of the things that maybe we don't always realize, so many people purchase through Amazon and through other online services. I don't mean to single just one out, but there's also a website inaccessibility. So people can't access to purchase. And it's such a mistake for organizations to not do the things that make a website easy to be read by screen readers, and so many different other ways.
It ends up hurting them more on the back end too, because then they realize like, oh, I'm going to get sued because my website's not accessible. And then they spend so much money on, like, rather than making it accessible on the front end and seeing about, like, I think people always think about, why would I make something accessible if I'm only going to bring in 1 or 2 customers, right? That, I feel like that's kind of the mindset people have, but that's not true, right? I've always said, you don't know who's going to show up in your store. You don't know who's going to show up at your conference, or you don't know who's going to show up in your synagogue at any given time. So why not be set up so that no matter who shows up at your door, you can serve that person, right? And you can provide them the same amazing service and the same amazing experience that you would with anyone else. And that could then also lead to not only a sale, but potentially an employee, or potentially so many other things that people with disabilities can bring value to in so many different spaces. It has often made me scratch my head that society globally doesn't see the value that our community brings to the table more directly, right? Like, oftentimes, Shelley, like, we have to do so much of the fighting and so much of, like, you said in your comments, like, why do I still have to continue to push the inclusion and diversity hill up the mountain kind of thing? And that if we can solve that question and we can figure that out, I think that would solve, bring about so many different amazing changes that I think could benefit all of us, really.
Equity.
Exactly.
And that's just one part of it.
Yes.
Wow. So, Matthew, you've been doing this for quite some time. Can you tell us about some of the changes that you've been involved with or have seen in terms of accessibility and in terms of attitude changes?
So it's that's tricky, honestly, because and I sort of make this argument on a consistent basis, right? I can lead a horse to water, and I can tell them like, hey, here's what you should be doing in terms of inclusion and accessibility and all of this stuff, but I can't make them drink the water, which I think is part of the mindset shift that we all need to continue to push, right? It is, I mean, I've had the privilege of doing amazing projects, right? And I've done work with my local county to make their libraries accessible. I do a ton of youth group work. I do tons of speeches at Sentara Healthcare, which is a big healthcare organization here in town, and got tons of speeches lined up, like I said, for the rest of this year. And I'm thrilled and continuing to do that fight. But I think what is most valuable would be, I provide you with my consulting report, or I provide you with a speech, and then you take it and you do something with it so that we can start to see significant changes. Like, yes, we are, I talk about corporate cultures in workplaces all the time, and I'm pushing for, have people with disabilities represented on your marketing materials, have people with disabilities represented in your office spaces via, the art that you have up on the walls or the pictures you have up on the walls. Because as a potential employee, like, I'm looking for those things if I'm going to go work in that business place. I don't want to be the first person with a disability to walk through that door at that office or at that organization. And so, if you are establishing a strong disability corporate culture, like, you are more than likely going to attract other people to want to work there. But, again, I can say all those messages and I can do all of those things. The trick is for then the client that I'm working with to take that advice and run with it, which, like, some do and some don't. And so it is frustrating in that way. And then it's also frustrating. The biggest thing that I'm trying to do is to have a mindset shift, right? And to get people to realize the value in the work that we're all doing. Shelley, you're doing very similar work in the work that we're all doing around D&I. But oftentimes you get the sort of internal response of like, well, I'm already ADA compliant, so why do I need to do more, right? And what's the value in going above and beyond compliance? And I don't want to spend $50 million to renovate a space to make it accessible. Well, my other argument to that would then be, well, you don't really have to do that, right? Another kind of big way that I do my work is I try to provide people with cost-effective and common sense solutions to make things accessible and inclusive, right? One of the examples I use all the time is when we were at in-person conferences, right? So often conference people love to put 1 million chairs in a conference space. And those chairs become additional obstacles to somebody like me who's a wheelchair user trying to navigate that conference space. And so I always argue, like, don't put a gazillion chairs in a space, because it becomes a barrier that doesn't allow for full access and inclusion. And the solution to that is so easy. Either don't put the 1 million chairs out and just put out the amount that you need, or in the example of like an office space, set up your office space so it's open floor planned and easy to navigate for people with all different ability levels to be able to exist in that space and exist comfortably in that space. Because one of the other frustrating things is, if you're not comfortable in your workspace, are you really going to be able to get your work done efficiently and effectively? Who knows? So, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but it all sort of ties together in yes, I've been very fortunate to do amazing work, and people are hearing my messages. However, we still have so much more work to do to get more people to see the value, to get more people to see the benefit, and I don't think we're there yet. And that's what kind of keeps me going every day.
Right. And that's where we have to keep with that message over and over and over again. And I just want to add this too, Matthew, when you were talking about conferences and all those chairs and so forth, we can talk to the meeting planners and we can say, don't have all the chairs because of accessibility concerns. But that's as far as it goes, and then maybe there aren't all those cheers, but why not speak from the podium? The person in charge or who's running the conference, speak from the podium and say, we are we are building accessibility here. It's important that everybody participate, and this is what the organization is doing today.
Well,
So
and that's so funny too, because like oftentimes at those conferences, there's not a ramp for somebody to get up on the stage. If like I can't tell you how many times I've been given an award or recognized in some form or fashion, and there's not a ramp for me to get up on the stage, so I always have to be sort of like singled out, and they're like, look at the guy in the corner, and they put the giant spotlight on me, and I don't mind, but how much better would it be if accessibility needs to be baked into everything that we do, in the business world, in our communities, at our conferences. Accessibility and inclusion should be at top of mind and on everyone's checklist consistently in every aspect of our lives that we do. And we are not there yet. And that's where we continue to have work to do.
Matthew, in the comments, we got 2 comments really related to that, sort of imagining meeting back in conferences again together. Emily said also the microphone thing, that people need to use them. And Liz said plain language is another barrier. So thank you, Emily and Liz, for putting those comments in. Before